Hi guys, Andro74871 here again. This is my last review I'm recording today, and this one, it's going to be a long one because there's kind of a lot of backstory that goes with this one. Basically, I am reviewing a Master Sword replica from a company, mainly one guy, called Heroic Replicas. Backstory. Ever since I first played Ocarina of Time back in the freaking 90s. God, I'm old. But ever since then, I've always wanted a replica of the Master Sword. Uh, my first forays into this were, of course, I had seen a few pictures that someone did of a forged Link to the Past Master Sword. I saw those on the internet a few times. I thought that was amazing looking. I started looking into custom swordsmiths, and one of the ones that I found that would take requests, I emailed. I said, how much would this cost? And they said, we can't do this. It is not possible to make this sword. And I was dejected. A few years later, found one on the internet, and my older brother bought it for me. Huge disappointment. The hilt was flat. It was a ugly antique silver with a neon yellow diamond. The handle itself was black, and the blade was too long and pretty much the wrong shape. I replaced this a couple years later with one that I found that was blue. Shorter blade, still the wrong shape, but it looked a little bit better. And then I got one a few years later. Go figure. This was around the time that I think Twilight Princess had just come out or had been out for a while. This one was better. This one had a closer to right shape, but it was massive, and something about the blade shape wasn't 100% right. Then I got one, and unfortunately that one has a lot of paint issues. It's chipped a lot over the years, and it's not as pretty as it once was. It still is from a distance, but if you get close and I actually turn it in my hands, I see all the paint wearing off, and it just doesn't look as good. And another one that I got was this one was very good at looking the part. The blade was the correct width, it was the correct shape. It was a little shorter, but I kind of liked that. The hilt was almost really good. The only problem was it was plastic, hollow plastic, and the paint job, the diamond, and the accents on the hilt were bright freaking yellow, like this yellow. And the hilt was a very not well done antique gray with a plain black handle. I had a friend repaint it. It looks fantastic, but I didn't feel like grabbing it off the wall. I thought that was as good as I was going to get. I was wrong. I later found out about a guy who did really good Master Sword replicas, and he had a site called Heroic Replicas. The ones I saw on his site looked amazing, but I wasn't 100% sold because, it's after so many Master Swords, I wanted to make sure that it was something quality, that it would hold up. So I commissioned him for something else. This was a much cheaper commission. His Master Swords are incredibly expensive. This one, I think, was maybe I can't remember. I'm not even going to try and remember. But this one is another Zelda sword. A lot of you younger people aren't going to recognize it, but this is Link's Chris sword from the Legend of Zelda cartoon from the 80s. Uh, I was thoroughly impressed with this. The quality is pretty darn good. It is resin hilt, leather wrapped, got nice little gem pieces in the pommel. These are some kind of sticker, but they look pretty darn good. The blade is very well done. About the only inaccuracy is it doesn't have a fuller down the middle like it does in the cartoon, but he did kind of make it to where if the light hits it the right way, it kind of looks like it has one, so I let that go. It looks amazing. I loved it, and I placed an order for the Master Sword. And this is the one I got. Now, right away, I fell in love with this, and I still do. It's pretty much the perfect shape. About the only difference between it and the one in the game is the one in the game is absurdly thick, would be about as thick as these tongs here, and that is impossibly thick for a sword. You wouldn't be able to hold it. There's no way, especially since the Master Sword doesn't have a fuller down the center, which most people call it a blood groove, but the fuller is there to help reduce the weight of a blade. Now this one, as you can see, the balance point is quite a bit up the blade. The hilt and pommel are resin. This is pretty much plastic. It is a very good, sturdy plastic, but it is still plastic. And while I loved it, I could admit that there were a few things that were a little slightly off. The color wasn't 100% right, and the handle being wrapped in black leather, while it feels good and looks good, isn't accurate to the games. But what I didn't know is that whenever Heroic Replicas made this, he was in the process of developing an improved version. And that's the one I'm really here to talk about today. Now, this sucker was expensive. It was a little less expensive for me because I'd been a previous customer, and pretty much my purchases helped him keep afloat at a couple of moments, so he was able to cut me a deal. He gave me a free concrete pedestal to place the sword in, and those usually at about $200, $250 to an order. It is a carbon steel blade, whereas this first one is stainless. And his second runs, these are meant to be combat ready, as in full tang, sharp, pretty much everything you could want from something that you'd go into battle with. Only problem, it's heavy, so I wouldn't suggest it. Plus, you'd probably mess up the finish of the blade. But, oh, Jesus, here it is. This is gorgeous. I absolutely love it. The color is perfect, and you can probably tell it kind of shifts a little bit in the light. The gems and this bit here, he calls them tongs. I'm not sure what they actually are, but they're pewter cast and electroplated with gold, so they look amazing. The Triforce symbol on this one, I went for the raised version, so it actually shows up a lot better than it did on the other one. I don't like doing this, but as you can see, the balance is a lot closer to the hilt. And I'm going to take that off of there because that is heavy as heck. Clean that a little bit. This is carbon steel, so I do have to take care of it. And I'll straight up say the blade isn't 100% perfect. It won't ever show up on camera, but there are some slight imperfections, but they're really only noticeable if I'm like this close to it and actually looking for them. Just like this, you can't tell it is an amazing looking blade. The hilt and pommel on this one are made of bronze, which is part of the reason this is insanely heavy. I think that he says that they weigh between 7 and 10 pounds, which for a sword is insanity. A good sword to use in combat should weigh no more than 3 pounds, unless you're talking claymores, which this is not. Now, I will say right off the bat, full disclosure, probably you can barely tell on camera, but this area right here was damaged by the U.S. Postal Service. I didn't notice it at first, and when I did, I was extraordinarily upset. But whenever he shipped the pedestal, I had him ship those separately because I just wanted this as soon as possible. But whenever he shipped the pedestal, he also shipped me some, it's either paint or fingernail polish in order to touch it up. And it, unless I'm looking right at it, I can't tell anymore. So I call that a win. The U.S. Postal Service, pardon my language and pardon my expression, but fuck you! Anyways, that was upsetting, but it looks better, and I'm holding that area up to the camera right now, and you can't even really tell. So, I call that a good win. It is much less blade heavy because it has the pommel and hilt to anchor it. But it is very hard to hold one-handed. And swinging it is tiring. I can do it pretty well. I go out in the backyard and swing swords around at least once a week. Or I try to anyways. So I don't consider myself weak, but this sucker is heavy, and swinging it around one-handed is a good way to throw off your balance, and because of that, I think there's a reason that Link uses a shield on his left or right arm, depending on which Link it is and which timeline it is. I'm not going to get into that any further. This is obviously based off of the Skyward Sword design. Main reason, as you can tell, is the shape of the wings, plus this bit, which on the Ocarina of Time Link to the Past version doesn't exist, or on the Link Between Worlds, or the Wind Waker. The Wind Waker one has a completely different design, though, so let's not get into that. And the Twilight Princess version would have gold trim on the blade and right around in here. Now, he did... Heroic Replicas is a guy, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he did show me some pictures that shows that he is working with the bronze model of his swords to make a Twilight Princess version. So, if you have the money to spend and you want a Twilight Princess Master Sword, you're able to do that. Uh, this one has the proper handle, has the green lace on the purplish blue handle. Uh, One thing to watch out for is these are hot glued on, so if you're like me and you go out swinging it around, you may have to touch it up at points, but small price to pay. It looks amazing, and this is pure and simple the single greatest Zelda item that I own, ever will own. I don't think I can do better than this. I am still going to try and do better than this because I do want a Hylian shield at some point. Because, quite frankly, you can't have the Master Sword without the Hylian shield. Do not buy the ones on eBay. I bought one of those at a anime convention and it broke just from me walking around holding it on my arm. Just a word of warning. The guy that made this says that he is possibly planning on doing a Hylian shield at some point. I can only imagine how heavy that sucker's going to be. But I've got the Master Sword. I have an Ocarina of Time. I just need a Hylian shield. Potentially thinking about getting a replica of Demise's sword and Zelda's rapier from Twilight Princess. Those will just be eBay items because the ones I've seen look pretty good, and I'm not going to drop the kind of money that I dropped into this beauty into those because those are not the main swords. This is the iconic weapon of the Zelda series. I've always wanted it, so dropping money into this sucker was not a big deal. I mean, it kind of was, but it wasn't at the same time, you know what I mean? And I'd also, I know it's silly, but I'd kind of like a Triforce at some point. I just think that'd be a neat thing to have too. Might as well, right? But, yeah, if you have any inclination at all towards ever owning a Master Sword and you don't want one of those cheapos off of eBay, if you've got the money, this is worth it. If it's not, this isn't bad. This is lighter, but it is also very blade heavy. But if you don't have the money to drop on the big replicas, these are still a decent sword. I wouldn't go hacking anything with it, but I wouldn't go hacking anything with the other one either because it's just too pretty. But that's about really all I have to say about it. It is an amazing sword, and I am so happy to finally own a Master Sword that just looks like it came right out of the games. A big thanks to Heroic Replicas for making this happen for me. I mean, I know it costs money, but still, the fact that he makes these things and sells them so that fans like me can own a piece of their childhood, own a piece of a game series that they love, is just amazing. And the fact that he was able to churn this sucker out means that he will try and work to make something for you if you want it. I can't guarantee that he'll do it, but this does mean that he will try. That's about all I've got. So, until the next time I decide to do a video, what's what they said? Oh, yes. May the way of the hero lead to the Triforce.